Welcome back to my educational channel on biology. Teacher Janet here. In this video, we're going to discuss Form 4 Biology, section 2.3, subtopic 2.3 in chapter 2 of the biology syllabus. So we're going to discuss the high density of organelles and relate it to the cell function. So different cells have different functions, and each type of cell is well adapted to carry out its function. That means it's well suited to carry out its function. How? By having certain organelles in abundance related to its function. Okay, for example, we find a lot of mitochondria in sperm cells, in the neck region of the sperm cells, in the flat muscle cells of birds, in the chest region here. Okay, and there are also lots of mitochondria in meristematic cells, which are cells that are constantly dividing to produce new cells for growth in plants. Right? So why do these three types of cells have so much or so many mitochondria? Okay, so let's find out about that and be able to explain the function of the mitochondria in all these cells. Now, Tay-Sachs disease is one disease that's caused by the failure of lysosomes and organelle, failure of lysosomes to produce a digestive or specific enzyme to digest fats. So let's find out about Tay-Sachs disease and why is it called a hereditary disease, all right? That can be passed down from parent to child. So let's dive into the topic. The learning standards are as follows. 2.3 Living processes in multicellular organisms. Firstly, we should be able to analyze the density of certain organelles and relate it to the functions of specialized cells in multicellular organisms. For example, cells in the pancreas or pancreatic cells. So here's a pancreatic cell. It has a lot of rough endoplasmic reticulum. Okay, this structure with the ribosomes attached to it. So we have to relate the density of or the abundance of this rough endoplasmic reticulum to the function of the specialized cell, the pancreatic cell, the function of the pancreatic cell. Okay. So secondly, we have to be able to describe the effects of deficiency, absence or failure in the function of an organelle in certain cells in multicellular organisms. For example, the failure of the lysosomes to carry out the function of producing digestive enzymes can cause a disease called Tay-Sachs disease in children. So let's find out more. So the high density of certain cell components is related to the specialized cell functions. Now here the cell components can mean the organelles, especially the organelles, right? Because organelles are components in the cells. So firstly, the functions performed by different types of cells are different. For example, muscle cells in the body help to produce movement through the contraction of the cells, contraction and relaxation of muscle cells. But pancreatic cells in the pancreas, they don't help to produce movement. They secrete enzymes for digestion of food. So different cells have different functions in the body. Thus, some cells have a higher density of certain cell components or cellular components or organelles compared to other cells to help these cells carry out their specific functions more efficiently. Okay, so certain cells will have high density of certain organelles to help the cells carry out their functions more efficiently. So the density of a cellular component or a cell component or organelle in a particular cell is related to the specific function of the cell. This is what we're going to discuss afterwards. Density here means the abundance, the number of the cellular component in a particular cell. It is related to the function of the cell. So we must know the functions of different types of cells, okay, and the functions of the organelles also, and then correlate the two. Now, first question, what are types of cells that have a higher density of certain cell components or organelles, such as the mitochondria, chloroplasts, rough endoplasmic reticulum, smooth endoplasmic reticulum, and Golgi apparatus. So what are examples of cells with a higher density of these cellular components or organelles compared to other cells. Secondly, relate the high density of these components, organelles, to the functions of the specific cells. All right, so we can explain the functions of the cells and relate it to the reason why there is a high density of a particular organelle. So first of all, let's look at the summary. Let's look at an overview of this chapter 2, cell biology and organization. So in the first few videos, we have discussed the cell structure and function. We discussed the structure of the cellular components, including the organelles and the functions. So the ones in black here are all the organelles, and other cellular components which are not organelles are the cytoplasm, plasma membrane, and cell wall. So you have to know the functions of all these organelles and other cellular other cellular components. Now in the second part, we discuss the living processes in unicellular organisms, such as amoeba species and paramecium species. We discuss the living processes like movement, nutrition, respiration, growth, excretion, reproduction, and response to stimuli in these unicellular organisms. Now, we are at this third part here, the living processes in multicellular organisms. So I've already prepared a video and discussed with you the types of animal and plant cells and tissues, and we've correlated the cell structure to cell function. That means the cell structure is adapted to the cell function. Now, we are at this point here. So in this video, we'll discuss the relationship between density of a cell component or an organelle with the cell function. What is the relationship between the two? That means how does the density of cell component or organelle affect the cell function, right? So certain cells have a high density of either the mitochondria or chloroplasts or rough ER, Golgi apparatus or smooth ER. What's the reason for that? Okay, it's related to the function of the cell. Now, then we'll discuss finally the effect of the absence or failure of a cell component like the lysosome, okay, an organelle in the cell. What's the effect of the failure of the lysosome to function on the cell, okay? And we'll be discussing the TAY-SACHS disease, which is a result of the failure of the lysosome to produce a digestive enzyme, okay? Now the last part is the levels of organization. Okay, cells are organized to form tissues, tissues are organized to form organs, and then systems, and then form the whole organism, and the functions of the organ systems. We'll discuss that in another video, which I have not yet prepared. Firstly, I want to give you the notes on the relationship between the density of a cell component or organelle with the specialized cell function. Okay, why certain cells have an abundance of certain cell components or organelles, right? So this table shows you the type of cell, the cell component or organelle found in abundance, and the reason why, the function of the cell, related to the function of the cell. So these notes here are often tested in the SPM past year's question. This topic is often tested. So I would suggest that you can copy down these notes into your notebook. And if I have the opportunity later on, I will try to create a PDF file and put these notes briefly into the PDF file for you to print out. Okay, so let's start. So here I'm just going to briefly read through these notes, and in the next section I will explain in more detail. For those who want a summary first, here's a summary. Okay, so number one, sperm cells have a lot of mitochondria. Singular form is mitochondrion. So sperm cells have a lot of mitochondria to produce a lot of energy through cellular respiration for the sperm to swim to the uterus and the fallopian tube in the woman's reproductive system in order to fertilize the secondary oocyte or ovum. Secondary oocyte is a stage of development of the ovum. Secondly, muscle cells. Blood muscle cells in insects and birds. And also the human muscle cells or animal muscle cells contain a lot of mitochondria to produce a lot of energy too through cellular respiration. But this time is for a different reason. It's for muscle cells to be able to contract and relax to enable movement and blood to occur. So for muscle cells to contract, they need a lot of energy supplied through the ATP, which is energy stored. And they need the mitochondria to produce the ATP, okay, which stores the energy. So next we have the meristematic cells in plants. They also contain a lot of mitochondria to produce a lot of energy for these meristematic cells to carry out active cell division through mitosis, a form of cell division. Mitosis is a form of cell division. In order for these meristematic cells here to produce more new cells, and then this will cause growth of the plant to occur. The plant can grow taller, or the roots can grow deeper down. Right? So meristematic cells are special cells that carry out active cell division in the shoot tip and the root tip of plants. And they need a lot of energy, so they have a lot of mitochondria in the cells, okay, to produce energy for active cell division. So please take note that for each of these reasons, I put there's a lot of mitochondria to produce a lot of energy. We have to write these words: a lot more of or more. Sperm cells have more mitochondria. Muscle cells have more mitochondria to produce more energy, okay? Because it's a comparison with the normal cells. You don't put these words, a lot of or more, a lot of mitochondria or more energy, then you may not get the mark, okay? Then explain the reason why. So, type of cell, palisade mesophyll cells and spongy mesophyll cells in the leaves of plants contain a lot of chloroplasts to absorb more sunlight to carry out the process of photosynthesis and produce organic food substances. Pancreatic cells, which are cells of the pancreas, contain a lot of rough endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi apparatus to increase the synthesis and secretion of digestive enzymes. Synthesis means the production, and then the secretion of digestive enzymes such as lipase, amylase, and trypsin to digest food substances. Okay, so because we know the pancreas is involved in digestion of food in the intestines. Now, goblet cells in the intestinal epithelium, which means the intestine, the epithelium is the inner layer, inner surface of the intestine, and it contains a lot of goblet cells. And also goblet cells in the respiratory tract, such as in the trachea, contain a lot of rough endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi apparatus too, okay, which are shown here, rough ER and the Golgi apparatus. But this is not the same function as for pancreatic cells. So goblet cells produce a lot of mucus which lubricates the movement of food in the intestine so that the movement of the food occurs smoothly and the food can move along without much friction in the intestines. And also mucus has another function. In the trachea, the mucus is used to stick dust particles in the air that's breathed in together, stick the dust particles together to be swept out of the trachea by cilia, which are hair-like structures on certain cells in the trachea. Now, liver cells contain a lot of rough endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi apparatus to help the liver synthesize a lot of proteins like albumin. So, liver also produces proteins, but different proteins from the pancreatic cells. Okay, and so to produce proteins, they must have these two. The cells must have a lot of rough endoplasmic reticulum and a lot of Golgi apparatus. Now, liver cells also have a lot of smooth endoplasmic reticulum to aid in the detoxification of drugs and poisons. The liver is used to remove toxins, that means detoxify the body of drugs and poisons. So it needs a lot of smooth endoplasmic reticulum for this purpose. Okay, and smooth ER is also used for the synthesis of lipids and to metabolize the carbohydrates, to convert carbohydrates into lipids. So now let's go into more details about the different organelles and the abundance of these organelles in the cells. We'll start with the mitochondria. Cells with a lot of mitochondria include the sperm cells, flat muscle cells of birds and insects, and meristematic cells in plants, okay, as shown here. So why do these cells have a lot of mitochondria? Now this organelle is shown here. This is a 3D picture of a mitochondrion, and this is a 2D picture which you are expected to know from. Okay. Now why do all these cells, the sperm cells, flat muscle cells, and meristematic cells in plants, have a lot of mitochondria? Why do they have a lot of mitochondria? Let's find out. So let's start with the sperm cell in more detail now. So sperm cells have a lot of mitochondria to produce a lot of energy through cellular respiration for the sperm to swim to the uterus and fallopian tube in the woman's reproductive system in order to fertilize the ovum or the secondary oocyte. Secondary oocyte is a stage of development of the ovum, right? So you look at this picture here of the female reproductive system. When the sperm enters the female reproductive system, it has to swim a long way. It's a tiny cell, but it has to swim a long way into the uterus and then to the fallopian tube here, where it will meet the ovum that comes from the ovary. All right, and then fertilization will occur here. Okay, may occur, and where the sperm fuses with the ovum to produce the zygote or the new offspring. Right? So that's why sperm cells have a lot of mitochondria. But where is it found? It's found in the midpiece of the sperm. So a sperm is made up of the head containing the nucleus and the enzymes in the acrosome here, and it has a midpiece here, the center part, and then it has a tail. So a lot of mitochondria is found in the midpiece here, all right, to give the sperm the ability to produce a lot of energy. Okay, please mention sperm cells have a lot of mitochondria to produce a lot, must mention a lot of energy or more energy compared to normal cells, right, for it to swim to the fallopian tube and fertilize the secondary oocyte or ovum. Now, let's go on to flat muscle cells, or just muscle cells, even muscle cells in humans. So example of muscle cells are the flat muscle cells in insects and birds. These are found in the chest region, as you can see here. Now, this is the front view of a bird as it's flying, and the purple colored area and the red colored area, these are the flight muscle cells, which you'll study in another chapter in Form 4. Okay, so these flight muscle cells here all have a lot of mitochondria. And even the normal human muscle cells, they have a lot of mitochondria to produce, again, a lot of energy, but for different reason. It's for muscle cells to contract and relax. Muscle cells need energy to contract, okay? Need energy from ATP to contract or shorten. When they shorten, they will pull the bones and then movement will occur, okay? And this will enable movement, such as flight. For example, for the wings to flap upwards and downwards, this is caused by the contraction of the contraction and relaxation of the flat muscle cells here. Okay, so we know that for birds, flying is a very big effort to be able to maintain their position in the air. They need to flap their wings very strongly and rapidly. So they need to have a lot of mitochondria in their flat muscle cells here in order to produce energy for the rapid flapping of the wings. Okay, powerful flapping of the wings. Now here we see the skeletal muscle cells. So each muscle fiber here is shown here. It has striations or stripes, and this is the nucleus. The blue color parts are the nucleus. Now if we cut through a cross section of the muscle cell, okay, and look at it, you will see that it has a lot of mitochondria. Then these gray circles here represent the contractile threads in the muscle called the myofibers. Okay, this is not so important, but you can see a lot of mitochondria, and that is to provide a lot of energy or more energy for muscle cells to contract, so that muscle cells can contract rapidly and powerfully to enable movement such as flight or even running. Thirdly, another cell that has a lot of mitochondria are the meristematic cells in plants. Example at the shoot tip and root tip. So these cells have a lot of mitochondria to produce a lot of energy for the meristematic cells to carry out active cell division. called mitosis to produce new cells for growth. For example, at the shoot tip here, okay, there are meristematic cells. At the root tips, at the ends of the roots here, there are meristematic cells. So meristematic cells are not found on every part of the plant. Okay, it's found at shoot tip, root tip, and certain parts of the stem. Now, these type of cells are very important because though they are tiny, they are always dividing. Okay, one cell divides into two like this. See, now you can see this cell dividing into two, and the lines here represent the chromosomes. Okay, the chromosomes that separate from each other here, right, to the two poles in order for the cell to divide. So meristematic cells are always dividing by mitosis to produce new young cells. So as the number of cells grow in the roots, then the root tip will go downwards. Okay, this part is called the root cap, but the pink part here is the meristematic tissue containing the meristematic cells that are actively dividing by mitosis. Okay, so inside these cells, inside all these cells, there are lots of mitochondria to provide the energy for active cell division. All right, in order to produce new cells so that the shoot can grow upwards, and the roots can grow downwards. So here we explain what meristematic cells are. They are plant cells that divide actively through mitosis or cell division to produce new cells for growth. The second organelle that we want to discuss is the chloroplast. So these pictures show the chloroplast. This is the 3D picture, and this is the 2D picture that you expected to know how to draw. Okay, so chloroplasts are organelles that contain chlorophyll in the thylakoid disc here, the disc-shaped structure called the thylakoids, that are stacked together to form granule. So chloroplasts contain the green pigment called chlorophyll. Now, cells with a lot of chloroplasts include the palisade mesophyll cell and the spongy mesophyll cell. Why do they have a lot of chloroplasts? Let's find out more. Now, palisade mesophyll cells and spongy mesophyll cells in the leaf, right, have a lot of chloroplasts to absorb more sunlight. Remember, you must have this word more, comparison, as compared to other types of cells. To absorb more sunlight to carry out photosynthesis to produce more organic food substances. Okay, so here's the position of the palisade mesophyll cells and spongy mesophyll cells when we cut through the leaf and look at the cross section. So the uppermost layer here is the waxy cuticle. Then the first layer of cells will be the upper epidermis. Then you have the palisade mesophyll cells, and then below the palisade mesophyll cells that are packed tightly together, okay, to absorb more sunlight. There will be also the spongy. There are also the spongy mesophyll cells, which with air spaces in between them to allow carbon dioxide to diffuse into the leaf. Okay, but these spongy mesophyll cells also can obtain sunlight, okay, from the top, and they also have a lot of chloroplasts, though less than the palisade mesophyll cells. And one more cell with chloroplasts is called the gut cell that controls the size of the stomach. Okay, so gut cells, spongy mesophyll cells, and palisade mesophyll cells all have have chloroplasts, but the most one is in the palisade mesophyll cells. The greatest abundance of chloroplasts is in the palisade mesophyll cells, just near to the surface of the leaf. Now here again is a drawing showing you the upper epidermis, right? Then we have the palisade mesophyll layer with all the chloroplasts inside, and then with the spongy mesophyll layer with a lot of air spaces here. So these cells are rounded, right? They also have a lot of chloroplasts. And here we see in this picture on the right, we see this is a photograph, photo micrograph, small photograph, showing you the chloroplasts that are green in color. So the chloroplasts contain the coloring substance that's green called chlorophyll, which can absorb sunlight and help the cell to carry out photosynthesis. So you can see all these palisade mesophyll cells that are more or less rectangular in shape. They have a lot of green rounded structures. These are all the chloroplasts. The third organelle and the fourth organelle that we're going to discuss are the rough endoplasmic reticulum and the Golgi apparatus. So cells with a lot of rough endoplasmic reticulum in short RER, and Golgi apparatus are the pancreatic cells, goblet cells, and liver cells. Okay, so this picture shows you the pancreatic cells. It looks a bit like a triangle, and this is the goblet cell. These two cells have a lot of rough endoplasmic reticulum. As you can see here, the purple structures are the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Okay, and also a lot of Golgi apparatus. Let's find out why these cells have a lot of these two types of organelles. So firstly, the pancreatic sacs, or cells in the pancreas. So the pancreas is a J-shaped organ just below the liver and near to the stomach, right? And it secretes enzymes into the small intestine here, the duodenum, or the small intestine. Now, the pancreatic cells contain a lot of rough endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi apparatus. So the rough endoplasmic reticulum looks like this. It has ribosomes attached to its surface, and the Golgi apparatus looks like this, okay, with parallel structures like this here, and some vesicles at the side. So you have to recognize and know how to draw these two organelles. Now, the function. So why do pancreatic cells have a lot of rough endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi? In order to increase the synthesis or production and also the secretion of digestive enzymes and hormones. So each pancreatic cell can produce either the digestive enzymes or hormones. All right, so pancreatic cells produce digestive enzymes such as lipase, amylase, trypsin, and hormones such as insulin and glucagon. So these cells will need a lot of these two organelles or three organelles, including the ribosomes, in order to produce these digestive enzymes and hormones. Okay, for example, firstly, the ribosomes on the rough ER, okay, these blue dots here, help to synthesize the proteins. Then the proteins are transported by the rough endoplasmic reticulum, the purple structure here. Okay, and then other than that, the rough endoplasmic reticulum will package these proteins in the transport vesicles and send them to the Golgi apparatus. Now, what's the function of the Golgi apparatus? Modifies and packages the proteins in secretory vesicles, okay, like some of these here, so that the secretory vesicles can transport the proteins, modified proteins, such as the enzymes or the hormones, to the plasma membrane and secrete these. For example, the enzymes are secreted out of the cell. Okay. So this picture here shows you one of the pancreatic cells. A picture of the pancreatic cell is a bit like a triangular shaped structure. And we can see it has a lot of these purple structures, which are the rough endoplasmic reticulum with the ribosomes attached to them. Okay, so each pancreatic cell also has a lot of Golgi apparatus to modify the proteins and package them so that it can be sent out of the cells by using the secretory vesicles. Okay, these green structures are the secretory vesicles, which will move to the plasma membrane and secrete the enzymes, for example, secrete the enzymes out of the cell. Okay, and pancreatic cell also has a lot of mitochondria to provide the energy for protein synthesis. That's something extra. Next here, there's some extra info which you can try to understand here, right? So some of these will be studied later on in the other topics. Now, this picture shows you a pancreas that's enlarged, the cross section or section through the pancreas. You can see two types of cells, the blue cells and the yellow cells. The blue cells here are the islets of Langerhans that secrete hormones into the blood vessels here, right? So they are produced, the hormones are produced by the islets of Langerhans cells in the pancreas. And another type of cell called the acina cells, which you don't have to really know, the acina cells secrete digestive enzymes to digest food into the pancreatic duct here. Okay, so these are actually the pancreatic cells secrete enzymes and hormones, right? 2 hormones and 3 enzymes. So the cells that secrete the enzymes are different from the cells that secrete the hormones, right, in the pancreas. Now, so what are the 2 hormones secreted by pancreatic cells? Firstly is glucagon, which converts glycogen into glucose when blood sugar level is low. And then we have insulin, which converts excess blood glucose into glycogen to be stored in the liver, right? So these two are hormones that regulate the body functions. And they are both proteins. Now, three enzymes. The three enzymes secreted by pancreatic cells are lipase, which digests the lipids into fatty acids and glycerol. Another enzyme is the enzyme pancreatic amylase that digests or breaks down the starch to form maltose. And then lastly, there's trypsin, which digests the polypeptides, right? For the digestion of protein. Okay, trypsin is one of the protein enzymes. So basically, we can say that there are 5 types of protein substances secreted from pancreatic cells, 2 hormones and 3 enzymes. So think of the word GLAT, an acronym to remember the 2 hormones and 3 enzymes. G for glucagon, I for insulin, L for lipase, A for amylase, and T for trypsin. Okay, this is quite a useful acronym. Okay, because pancreatic cells secrete these 5 substances which are very important for the body. Now, next here we see the picture again of the picture of the pancreatic cell. All right, of one pancreatic cell, which looks like a triangular shaped structure. And here the purple structure is the rough endoplasmic reticulum with the ribosomes attached to it. Then we have the Golgi apparatus. So pancreatic cells have a lot of rough endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi apparatus. And also they have a lot of mitochondria, which are to provide energy for the synthesis of protein. Okay, and here we see the secretory vesicles that transport the enzymes or the hormones. Okay, so secretory vesicles will move to the plasma membrane, and they will then secrete for example, the enzymes, secrete the enzymes out of the cells. All right. So this picture shows you the function of insulin. Pancreatic cells here inside this J-shaped structure secrete the hormone insulin when blood sugar level is high to decrease the blood sugar level back to normal, especially after a meal of carbohydrates. Now let's discuss the goblet cell. So goblet cells also have a lot of rough endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi apparatus like the pancreatic cells, but for a different reason. Okay, so goblet cells are found in the intestinal epithelium and the respiratory tract of humans. Respiratory tract here, especially the trachea, which is the windpipe of the body that helps connect the nose to the lungs, right? To allow air to flow into the lungs. So intestinal epithelium means the tissue that covers the inner surface of the intestines. Okay, the inner surface of the intestines is lined with a tissue called the epithelium. Now, this epithelial tissue contains a lot of goblet cells, right? And these goblet cells have a lot of rough endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi apparatus to produce a lot of mucus. So mucus is a sticky substance that is produced by goblet cells. Like for example, when person has a runny nose, a lot of mucus is produced, right? And it will come out through the nose, runny, when the person has a runny nose, right? So in Malay, the mucus is called hingus or lendir. Now, this mucus produced by goblet cells, they have a lot of proteins. They contain proteins, sugars, and water in them. So to make or synthesize these proteins, the goblet cells need to have a lot of rough endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi apparatus. They produce a lot of this mucus. So what's the function of the mucus? Now, in the intestines, here, the small and large intestine, the mucus will coat the food inside the intestines and help to lubricate the movement of the food so that the food can be along slowly by a process called peristalsis. But it will move along smoothly with less friction due to the mucus, okay, that coats the food. Now, however, in the trachea, the mucus has a different function. The trachea or windpipe here, the mucus helps to stick dust particles together. The dust particles that are in the air will be stuck together, stuck on the mucus, and then mucus will be swept out of the trachea by hair-like structures called cilia on certain cells in the trachea. So in this way, the mucus helps to filter the air that flows through the trachea before the air enters the lungs. Now, this picture here shows you a few organs that contain the goblet cells, namely the trachea or windpipe, the small intestine here, and the large intestine. So this picture shows the structure of one goblet cell. It looks like the pattern looks like that of a foot, right now, the sole of a foot, tapak kaki. Now, it also contains a lot of rough endoplasmic reticulum, ribosomes, Golgi apparatus, and mitochondria, just like the pancreatic cells. Okay, but in this case, the goblet cell doesn't produce enzymes or hormones. The goblet cells produce mucus, right, which is a sticky substance. So in the goblet cell, we can see a lot of rough endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi apparatus, and also ribosomes on the rough endoplasmic reticulum, and a lot of mitochondria. Now, the function of all these organelles is still the same as what we have discussed for the pancreatic cells. Okay, for example, the ribosomes help to synthesize the proteins, and then these are transported by the rough endoplasmic reticulum, and then they're packaged in transport vesicles and sent to the Golgi apparatus, where the proteins are modified and the mucus is formed, right? Then these substances of the mucus, they are packaged in the secretory vesicles that move to the plasma membrane and secrete the mucus out of the cells, right? So the function of the mitochondria, there's abundance of mitochondria also in these cells, and that is to help produce energy for the synthesis of the mucus, right? So goblet cell has a lot of rough rough endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi apparatus to produce a lot of mucus, which actually contains the proteins, some proteins, to lubricate movement of food in the intestines or to stick dust particles together in the trachea, okay, depending on where the goblet cells are found. So remember, in the exam, please don't write ER, you must write rough endoplasmic reticulum. Spell it out completely. You just write rough ER, you may not get the mark for that. Now, lastly, the liver cells. So liver cells have a lot of rough ER and Golgi apparatus too, just like the pancreatic cells. Why? Because they also produce a lot of proteins, different proteins from the pancreatic cells. They produce proteins like albumin and also blood clotting factors. So the rough ER and Golgi apparatus help the liver to produce more proteins, right? And if you break them down, you can say that the ribosomes on the rough ER in the liver cells first synthesize the proteins, then the rough ER functions to transport the proteins by using the transport vesicles to the and they produce a transport vesicle. And they transport proteins in the center of their structures first, and then they will package the proteins in transport vesicles, which are then sent to the Golgi apparatus. Golgi apparatus modifies and packages the proteins such as albumin for secretion out of the cells, okay, out of the liver cells. Next, liver cells also contain a lot of smooth ER or smooth endoplasmic reticulum, as shown here. Now, the smooth ER is used for the detoxification or removal of toxins. Okay, detoxification means the removal of toxins or poisons, such as harmful drugs and poisons from the body. The smooth ER is also used for the production of lipids such as fats and cholesterol by the liver. And it also helps to metabolize carbohydrates by converting excess glucose into the lipids. So lastly, we are going to discuss the Tay-Sachs disease, short form TSD. So this disease involves the failure of lysosomes to carry out their function, and this causes death of neurons in the brain and spinal cord, and it leads to mental retardation in a child, and also stunted physical growth. So this disease was discovered by two people, namely Warren Tay, an English ophthalmologist, and Bernard Sachs, an American neurologist. Let's find out more. So what are the effects of a deficiency, absence, or failure in the function of cellular components or organelles? Are there any effects if there's an absence or a failure of an organelle? So basically, all cell components perform their respective functions to ensure that the cells function at the optimum level. All right. So we can compare the cell to a factory, and the factory contains different parts, which are the cell components. Okay, which are the different parts represent the cell components, right? So all the cellular components perform their respective functions efficiently to ensure that the cells function at the optimum level. Now, the collaboration or cooperation of all the cellular components or organelles in a cell is similar or can be compared to a factory. Okay, the cell's like a factory with different parts. Different parts meaning the organelles, all right, as compared to the organelles, and each with its specific function. So all the different parts function efficiently so that the cell can survive and function at the best level, the optimum level. However, sometimes there is a deficiency, absence, or failure of the cellular components or an organelle, such as the lysosomes, mitochondria, chloroplasts, or ribosomes. That means maybe some organelles may not be able to carry out their functions efficiently. For example, failure of the mitochondrion, which is an organelle that is used to produce energy through cellular respiration. So failure of the mitochondrion function or a mitochondrion dysfunction. Failure of mitochondrion function meaning dysfunction. Failure of function meaning dysfunction. Textbook uses the word disjunction, but I can't find this on the net. So it could mean dysfunction. Not sure. So if there's a failure, anyway, if there's a failure of the mitochondrion to function, it can cause stunted growth, weak muscles. This is because then the mitochondria cannot produce energy for many processes in the body, okay, and can cause hearing and vision problems. Now let's talk about a disease called Tay-Sachs disease that is caused by the failure of lysosomes in the cells to digest certain food substances. Okay, lysosomes. So Tay-Sachs disease, TSD, note the spelling, Tay-Sachs disease, is a rare hereditary disease. That means it can be passed down from the parents to the child, caused by a gene mutation, normal changes to the genetic material in the chromosomes, or on the DNA in the chromosomes. The gene mutation occurs on chromosome number 15 in the human cell, which is one type of chromosome. So when there's a gene mutation or abnormal change to the genetic material, the instructions for the production of certain proteins is changed. Okay, for example, in this case, the code or instructions for the production of an enzyme in the lysosome, we call it the lysosomal enzyme, or an enzyme in the lysosome, is then changed. It's no longer the right code. So this leads to the failure of the lysosomes in the neurons or nerve cells here in the body to produce a specific enzyme. That specific enzyme is needed to break down certain fats in the neurons. But now, if the lysosomes do not have that particular enzyme, they cannot digest or break down the certain type of fats. So the fats will accumulate in lysosomes because they cannot be broken down. And then will build up to unwanted fats to toxic levels in the neurons. Then this causes the neurons to die. Okay, so this picture shows you the sequence of events. First, there's a mutation or abnormal change in the DNA found on chromosome number 15. And this mutation can be caused by certain agents like ultraviolet rays, excessive ultraviolet rays, or X-rays and so forth. So when this mutation occurs, the DNA of the cells has the wrong code for the production of a digestive enzyme. So then the lysosomes will fail to produce an enzyme that can digest the fats in cells, such as in neurons. Okay, lysosomes have got the wrong code of instructions. They produce something, maybe a type of defective protein that cannot act as an enzyme to digest the fats anymore. Okay, so there's something wrong with the molecule of the enzyme. Okay, the molecules, the enzyme molecules produced by these patients with the TSD or Tay-Sachs disease. Next, the fats in the cells cannot be digested, they cannot be broken down, so they will broken down to smaller components, so they will accumulate in the lysosomes where they are supposed to be digested, but they're not digested, so they accumulate the lysosomes and cause a toxic condition that cause the neurons to die. Now, effects and symptoms of this disease. So this absence of an enzyme that helps break down fatty substances leads to a build-up of certain fats, which we call gangliosides, in the neurons to toxic levels. You don't need to know this term, gangliosides. This is just for information. So the gangliosides or the fats build up in the neurons of brain and spinal cord. Okay, in the nerve cells of the brain and spinal cord, causing the death of the neurons in the brain and spinal cord. So this results in the symptoms of degeneration of brain and spinal cord, because the brain and spinal cord has neurons that have died, so they will slowly become in a worse condition, and they will not function well. Okay, the brain and spinal cord will not function well. Symptoms start at about 3 to 6 months of age, right after the time that they are born, the baby is born. Causes stunted growth, mental retardation. These two symptoms are stated in the textbook, so you have to know them. Causes seizures. Seizures are like Malay you call it sawan, or Chinese is fa zuo, and that means they suddenly get this shaking and movement, okay, which they cannot control, right? Shivering, shaking, movement like that. So then this Tay-Sachs disease also causes blindness because the nerve cells are affected, okay, and the loss of hearing, and also paralysis where they can't move much, and then death. So it's a fatal disease. But this disease, I don't think it can be cured because it's caused by genetic factors, unless in future they have genetic gene therapy for it. So in summary, the Tay-Sachs disease, let's say you're asked to explain the Tay-Sachs disease, okay, then firstly you must know that the function of the lysosome is to break down the large molecules like fats for recycling in the cell, okay. But in Tay-Sachs disease, failure of the lysosome to function, okay. So Tay-Sachs disease is a rare genetic or hereditary disorder or disease passed down from parents to child. So okay, this is the question. How does Tay-Sachs disease occur? 6 months. Firstly, there's mutation of the gene on chromosome number 15 that codes for the production of an enzyme. So this code for the production of an enzyme to digest fats is changed. So this causes the lysosome to be unable to produce a specific enzyme to digest or break down certain fats in the neurons. When the toxic fats are not broken down, they will accumulate in the neurons of the brain and spinal cord, in the lysosomes here, and this will cause the nerve cells to die. So once nerve cells die, then the symptoms will appear, like stunted growth, mental retardation, seizures, vision, hearing loss, paralysis, and they only live for a few years. So that's all for this lesson. Here we come to the formative exercise. Formative exercise 2.3. Firstly, state 3 organelles found in high density in cells that secrete protein, underline with protein products. What are the 3 organelles that are needed to produce and secrete the protein products? Okay, what's the answer? 3 organelles needed for secretion, production and secretion, or synthesis and secretion of protein products are ribosomes, rough endoplasmic reticulum, and Golgi apparatus. So you have to know the functions of each one of these organelles, okay, in relation to production of protein products. Now, firstly, ribosomes synthesize the proteins. Next, the rough endoplasmic reticulum transports the proteins and also packages the proteins into transport vesicles. Packages the proteins in transport vesicles, which then move to the Golgi apparatus. Next, Golgi apparatus functions to modify the proteins to form the protein products like enzymes and hormones. And then Golgi apparatus packages the proteins, modified proteins, in the secretory vesicles. Secretory vesicles move to the plasma membrane and then secrete the proteins out of the cell. Okay. Number 2, describe the structure and function of the nerve tissue. Okay, so there are 2 parts. Structure first. Structure of nerve tissue. It is made up of neurons or nerve cells, like this one here. We have cell bodies. Okay, this rounded circular part here. Cell bodies containing the cytoplasm and the nucleus. Here the nucleus is yellow. And the nerve tissue consisting of neurons. These neurons also have extensions of fibers called the dendrites. The shorter ones here are the dendrites and dendrons, and they also have the axons. Then we come to the function. The first part is about the structure, now the function. The function of the nerve tissue is to coordinate and control body activities. Next, explain why palisade mesophyll cells have a lot of chloroplasts. So palisade mesophyll cells have a lot of chloroplasts, which contain chlorophyll to help absorb more light for photosynthesis. Okay, through the green called the chlorophyll, that's one of the chloroplasts. And this is in order to produce more organic food substances for the plant. Lastly, fat cells have 3 adaptive characteristics to allow the storage of fat. Describe the 3 characteristics. So this is like a hot question. Now, fat cells contain very little cytoplasm but have high fat content. Okay, so they store very little cytoplasm and the space is used for storing fats. Fat cells contain very few mitochondria because it does not need a lot of energy. Okay, so you just need to store the fats, that's all. Alright, so storage of fats does not need energy in that sense. Lastly, fat cells can expand to store more fat. So one adaptive characteristic or adaptation is they can expand, okay, to store more fat. Right, that's all for this lesson. Thanks for viewing, and I hope that it has helped you. This lesson has helped you. So happy studying, and until we meet again, goodbye for now. Please do help to share, like, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.